how come we don't have enough people to do the jobs? Why has infrastructure spending gone up so much? This is pre-pandemic. The first thing I want to think about is like why? Like clearly that's a trigger point. Clearly something's happened. Obviously that explains the job shortage. Part of the reason why a lot of builders and developers are going broke. Hey guys, I was thinking last night about the whole housing crisis we're going through at the moment. I was kind of getting onto the point of how come we don't have enough people to do the jobs? Like, even if we had the capacity to develop all of the land that's required to build the houses, we don't have the skills to actually build the houses. It kind of got me onto a lot of things, as these sorts of thoughts always do. The financial crisis in general, I think every crisis is related. It's all the same thing. The housing, the rental, the cost of living crisis, the productivity crisis. It's all the same thing. It's all the same issue. And I thought to myself, I always go back to the infrastructure spending, right? I'm like, why has infrastructure spending gone up so much? This is pre-pandemic. This is a long time ago. So let's have a look at this graph here. This is estimated infrastructure spending or civil infrastructure spending till 2025. This was February 9, 2019. So remember, this was prior to the government coming out and flooding even more cash into the economy. So you can see there we got to about 2015, 2016, and then all of a sudden, all of this money's been put in. The first thing I want to think about is like why? Like clearly that's a trigger point. Clearly something's happened where governments have said, we need to spend some money here. Let's have a look at the numbers quickly. It's gone from 5 billion to 23 billion, whatever that is, 4.6 increase, so 460%. Forgive me if my math is wrong there. And you can bet your bottom dollar that's gone up several 100% since COVID got announced. Obviously, that explains the job shortage, and it explains part of the reason why a lot of builders and developers are going broke, because as those jobs get taken from the residential market, government paid jobs pay a lot higher. They got better worker rights, all that sort of stuff. So builders have to pay more for the skills and the labour. And unfortunately, we've gone through a stage where rates went up and a lot of builders have gone bankrupt. The question still remains why? Why did we just have a 500% increase in infrastructure spending? The first place I wanted to look was the unemployment rate, because it would kind of make sense if the unemployment rate was going up and they started spending more, because that's going to create jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. That's what the politicians always say. But if you look around that time, 2015, 2016, sure, it was kind of high. It topped out at kind of almost 6.5, but it had been coming down over that period of time. So there's the argument you could make they were worried about unemployment, but 5.5 isn't really a massive amount of unemployed. I think in Victoria, in the recession we had to have, we got over 10% unemployment. So it's a far cry from that. The other thing I looked at was inflation. So then I looked at the graph for inflation, and you can actually see here around that time, 2015, it had been dropping. Like we're getting lower lows on that graph. And obviously if that kept on going, it turns to deflation. So that's the other side of the coin of inflation. And deflation actually means deflating wages would scare the bejesus out of anyone. This seems to me like something that has been done strategically to boost inflation. Obviously, hindsight is 2020. And what I'm going to try to do is kind of between then and now, because obviously we've had an inflation problem since then. What I'm trying to make here is that it's a really bad piece of financial engineering. Why? Because it's going to make the economy more volatile. It already has made the economy more volatile. Just look at what's happened the last kind of 5 or 10 years. If the government has to stop spending money, and we've seen what's happened with the Victorian government, they're under some real heat for spending all this money that we haven't seen payoff for yet, and it's costing a lot more than what was originally sold to us. But the point is these projects are going to peel off because it's not viable for governments to spend more than what they earn for a long period of time. It creates another set of problems. So these projects have to peel off, meaning the rate of spending of the projects have to peel off. And that means there's going to be a change in the jobs market at some point in the future. Obviously not anytime soon, but at some point in the future that's going to play out. The reason why this isn't good is because larger amount of spending translates into higher incomes. That's what they wanted to do. Well, that's what I'm saying they wanted to do back in 2015 when they printed all this money, when they created all this money, I should say. It's worked. Sure, we had COVID and they had to do another round of printing and creating, but it worked. We got inflation. But it's two sides of a coin, and at some point there's going to be a run down. Maybe there's more of a run up. I'm thinking there's an equal probability of a run up before we get the actual run down. What's going to happen is we saw that in the last 24 months, we've got a mini, almost like a mini cycle. Rates went up significantly. People's ability to repay their debts was seriously challenged. And I think the risk going forward is that 30-year trend we had of interest rates going down. We have a multi-decade trend of units not necessarily going up, but staying elevated, and that's going to put pressure, more pressure on families. I'm not saying that's what will happen. I'm saying that's a risk of what will happen. The reason why it's bad financial engineering is because these guys obviously don't know what they're doing. We didn't have bad unemployment. Sure, we had some issues with inflation, but in my opinion, you wouldn't fix that through government. You'd fix that through, for a lack of a better term, through capitalism. So all of this money is not, it's gone to big businesses, right? And it's a trickle down. Whereas the little businesses, the guys that are forced to innovate, create new things, which means new skills and new competition for productivity gets created. The money doesn't go to the little guys anymore. It goes to the big guys. And this is at the heart of the problem. This financial engineering, it's going to end really badly, because what's going to happen when there's too much debt and people start, not being able to afford the debt, or some part of the economy starts not being able to afford the debt because it spreads. So eventually they have to go back to the printing press. But how long do we play this game? Obviously, the divide between the rich and the poor is exacerbating. What I'm saying is the volatility of the economy means the rich are going to win, the guys at the very top, and the guys closer to the bottom are going to lose. I kind of liken it to when I grew up in a drinking culture, and we used to have these parties. We used to have these keg parties, right? A keg is just a barrel of beer. There just used to be one keg where I was from. It's a 50-litre barrel. You'd have your cooler box, you'd have your gas, and you'd have your tap, I should say. What would happen at these parties is no one would know. You've just got 18-year-old kids at this party and they just want the beer. What happens is everyone comes in and they're adjusting the knobs, and then they're just pouring foamy beer out, and it's not working. They just keep pouring. Other guys come in because everyone's an expert now. This is a keg party. Generally what happens is, obviously there's a lot of waste, but this is how governments do things. Like, look at our politicians. They're not smart people. Let's just put it that way. That's not trying to put people down. What I'm trying to say is they're not experts. They're parading around like they know everything. They don't, and what they're actually doing is they're just 18-year-old kids at a keg party playing with knobs and dials, just stuffing stuff up more. I've probably gone on a bit of a rant now. The point I'm trying to make, and what I try to drill into people time and time again, is this uncertainty, and I'm getting the uncertainty with my clients. I'm getting the what do we do now? And that's not just from first home buyers, that's from guys in the middle, and that's from guys planning for retirement. The question is, what do we do now? And this uncertainty, this volatility in the economy is putting the little guy at risk. So they watch your debt, because debt is the number one way over thousands of years people have been financially wiped out, because anything could happen in this market.